Rock and roll.
Okay. Well, Happy New Year, everyone, and I'd like to welcome all to the first meeting of the Human Affairs and Racial Conciliation Commission of 2025. As is customary, we'll open with a moment of silence. Certainly being thankful for a new year, cognizant and concerned with the number of domestic terrorist activity and fires and things, and thankful for what appears to be a peaceful transition of power at the national level. As we begin now to think more about what our responsibilities here in Charleston, let's clear our minds in a moment of silence and focus on the work that we've been charged to do. Okay. So, did we have anyone from the public sign up to speak today? No? I see no members of the public present. So, we're all family, so we'll move on to the approval of the minutes of the December 12th, 2024 meeting.
I would move to approve, but I do have some just like minor, spelling and word corrections that I went through.
Okay. A motion to approve with minor corrections. Your second?
Same,
Bob?
minor corrections.
All right, we'll pass those on to Jasmine. Motion moved and seconded to accept the minutes as drafted with minor corrections. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. I have a motion to flip-flop item 5 and 6. Let's have a manager's report first, and then have a discussion. Chairperson's comments. Got a motion to that effect, please? Moved and properly seconded that we'll proceed with item 6 before item 5. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Abstentions, so ordered. Happy New Year. Floor is yours, Adrian.
Thank you. Happy New Year. So I have a very brief manager's report because my manager report has to do with the annual report. I've been preparing for that. I'm going to do the annual report to council on January 28th. And so I would appreciate if those commissioners who are available are able to be there. I'm not sure yet. I think I'm under communications. So that's usually in the earlier portion of, is it, Steve? So it's more so in the beginning of it. I also spoke with the mayor's office and executive director for the YWCA concerning the Dr. King's business breakfast. So we do, the mayor's office does have some seats available that the city, because we know that the city is a sponsor, a dream sponsor for that breakfast. So I would need to know who all are interested in attending so that I could give a number to their office.
So members of the commission who have not already purchased tickets or have already made arrangements for the breakfast. And what day is the breakfast, please?
The breakfast is next Thursday, January 16th.
At 7 a.m.
At 7 a.m.
So
Brandon Fish,
Carol Jackson, Alvin,
Carol Jackson,
Tom Poor,
Tom.
Bob.
Alvin.
Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm.
You said Bob? Okay, so I have Brandon Fish, Carol Jackson, Tom Orth, Alvin Johnson, and Bob Simon.
So one of the things about the event that's nice is Adam Shoemaker is the keynote speaker, so a former member of the commission, so it'll be good to be in the house for that purpose. Okay,
Mr. Chair, are we gonna talk about any of the other, there are two or three other, what I think are even better than the breakfast events associated with the
Well,
weekend, instead of
yeah.
ecumenical service.
sure. Why don't we let Adrian finish, and then we'll talk about that if she's got, okay?
Mhm. And so you received, I put in your folders, I've been working on the annual report. I have a PowerPoint presentation draft that I circulated. Well, I've also made edits to that draft, depending on those who sent over their feedback. And so it is a draft. It's not a final report. That is also located in the Google Drive. And so you still have an opportunity to push your feedback towards those documents, and also a memo, because certain feedback gave that there was more meat needed in certain areas, such as the Black Wall Street directory, the creation of the Human Affairs Working Group, and also the Gaza conflict. Those things are also in the backing document. We do have to make our submission to the clerk of council so that they are able to send out those packets to council members no later than the 21st.
So,
I'll look at the
Um,
calendar, because I have to meet with our co-chairs as well. So I will look at the calendar and get you a deadline.
I'm sorry, Adrian, you say that the schedule to be on the agenda on the 28th?
Yes,
So the handy dandy schedule that you gave us, that has the agenda, date submissions, says that they need to have it by the 16th. Is that?
I spoke to Jennifer, and she told me no later than the 21st.
Okay, great.
So-
Great. I asked that, so that gives us time to go back and forth.
Mhm.
The question to the commissioners, the report is going to city council. It'll also be a public document. Is there any concern about what it would look like in terms of, cover and cover letters and all that kind of stuff like that? Or not?
We have a committee, right? Aren't you?
Well, co-chairs and Bonnie and Bob are, doing that. I'm raising that, in terms, because it just becomes more.
I mean,
Okay.
I personally trust the committee to,
Okay.
I was just
finalize it.
curious, if there's a standard city format for these kind of things. I mean, I have no idea. I come from a federal background where everything was kind of start here and make it look like this. And if there's nothing, then it looks good. But if there's something that they have that they prefer, it's easier to get people's attention if they're used to
Well,
seeing something.
My point is, there's two things. One is our report, okay? So how it's presented, it says something about who we are. So I'm just raising that, cover, letter from the co-chairs, and then the substance of the report, laid out, and then that sort of thing, and whatever we can accomplish in the timeframe.
I trust the committee. I mean, you all volunteered to turn it in on our behalf, so.
Voluntold. Okay, I'm sorry.
And, well, that's about all, because we have it on here about the annual report where we can discuss that more. That's mainly what I was going to discuss. So thank you.
If you prefer to have the conversation about the annual report, I didn't realize that we had secured a date for presentation. So that was one of the questions: when did we want to present? Now that we have a date certain, that makes that less possible. Are there other comments? I know not everyone had the opportunity to submit written comments, or they're looking at the drafts. Are there comments, concerns? There are a number of things that folks raised in terms of amplifying particular pieces of work as examples of conversation. are there other that we need to add, in which case we would have to draft it and, you know, help Adrian have the language, you know, to insert it.
I mean, Bob, you said in the minutes that you had history related, so you put those in. I'm assuming.
Bob submitted about, like I stated, when Dr. Dillengard came and did her presentation, that is inside the memo. That is also on the PowerPoint.
Okay. No other comments as it relates to the annual report? Other questions for Adrian? She's given us an update on the report. She's given us update on Dr. Martin Luther King activity. Any movement on BAR?
No, not at this time.
And going back over the minutes, we had, we're looking for feedback from the legal department on the MOU draft as it relates to the Human Relations Commission.
So I don't have an update on that. I'm sorry. Losing everything. It's the new year. I do have an update on that. Thank you, Jerry. So in reference to the Human Affairs Council, we know that we had the presentation from South Carolina Human Affairs, the commission located up in Columbia. So a couple of questions that the legal department has proposed. And I will also send this out in an email. I apologize for not getting it out in advance. And we also discussed this. We need to know which way are we leaning towards? Are we leaning towards being a community relations council, or are we leaning towards being an advisory council? We know that when they came and did the presentation, there was a difference in the two. And also, if we, depending on which side we lean on, what type are we going to be? Are we going to be a partner-oriented direct or general participation? So those are a couple of questions that they had, and also how we would need to, how are we going to establish the general operating model? So those are the questions that legal posed for our general body. No, we have not discussed it.
So in order to move this forward in our conversation, Stephen and I and Adrian basically suggested her to give us a decision memo, you know, saying what she thinks, right, would be the best response, and let us debate off of that. I had a conversation with Commissioner Fry today, who said, let's don't do nothing. All right. Not do anything. All right. Don't move forward with that. No, he sees it as further complicating, more lazy. He's a small government guy. All right. So, and unfortunately he said he couldn't be here. But I told him I would communicate what he had, had indicated. So, is it the will of the body to, after Adrian gets the final report done, to do a decision, make a recommendation to us? So,
Meaning we would talk about it in February.
that's correct. Is that?
Yeah,
That sounds like
I think, because I do think that we were, pretty sincere in the minutes, or what created the minutes, that we know we need to be providing a resolution, but we can't provide a resolution until, I guess,
Yeah, exactly.
we have the waterfall of what decisions are
Yeah.
we gonna.
Yeah, I mean, didn't want to pass a resolution that legal said couldn't get to council, so trying to get all that lined up.
I mean, are there gonna be constraints based on your conversation with legal, Adrian? Is there, I mean, are they leaning for us in a particular direction, or do we have an open path to?
They're not leaning for us in any direction right
Okay.
now. They're more so leaning towards us to give them an answer to what we are wanting to do.
Okay, that sounds good.
Mhm.
So we've taken care of, the annual report. We're moving forward to, present on the 28th. The subcommittee will work with Adrian to finalize that by the 21st. And prior to, is it fair to say a week before our next park meeting, Adrian, you can have the, decision, your recommendation on the Human Relations Commission?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Do we happen to have that PowerPoint that they presented?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah,
I'll get it from them. I don't
Okay.
have it, but I can definitely get it from them.
sounds good.
And, and you're saying we already have a task force to work on this with Adrian, or? You said something about a subcommittee,
I was saying as it relates to the annual report.
right? So we
Yes.
we don't have a subcommittee to work on the
Well,
human
there's Human
relations stuff.
Relations Work Group,
Yeah,
Brandon
and
and
me,
Dr. Cleveland.
but I don't feel like I would like one more member of our work group if we're gonna make recommendations in that regard.
I thought that was for a different purpose, to work through the negotiations or relationship building with the
Well,
Muslim and Palestine advocacy
it's-
community. Oh, in general, okay.
I think it's the General Human Relations Commission, so I think if you're up for that, Brandon, you and I and one other person could talk about the Human Affairs Commission.
Okay.
all right, so
Who
we
wants to
need,
join
we
us?
need to draft somebody. Tom, are you willing to join that, that group? No, huh? Alvin?
I got you, Bonnie.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so, recall when we began in the discussion about trying to facilitate bringing folks together around the, Hamas, Israeli conflict. The first thing was to have the conversations, all right? The second thing was to look at the Human Relations Commission framework, all right? And use that kind of as the gateway into that discussion. That was always the intention. And now we're in the position, we got a working committee, a draft, guidance from the, legal department. And we hopefully can get something to the, before the council, in February. Okay, great. Super. Moving right along, moving right along. Okay. If there's no other questions for Adrian? No, are there any, directives or requests that have come from, the mayor's shop? You know, policy people, anybody, anything in particular that they want us to address?
No, sir, not at this time.
Okay. Good. Okay. Stephen, any comments you have?
To me, like, one of the, things I quickly realized when I got on council is the severity of our housing issues, which we've talked about quite a lot. And it's kind of a new wrinkle. I saw North Carolina yesterday joined a federal lawsuit against, including one very large local property owner, kind of commercial landlord. Potentially there's some collusion going on between these major apartment owners to make sure that rents only go in one direction, using can't remember, RealPage or something.
Yeah.
So that's actually happening in a lot of industries. They cater pricing specifically to like what they know about you based on your phone if you go to McDonald's. I mean, so, but it's a real problem in our housing market, or it could be a real problem in our housing market. And there's, obviously the issues of supply and demand that we've talked about plenty of times and are, going to be a big hot button. But more information was presented from the Bloomberg folks at the man, I'm blanking on the committee.
December
Yeah,
19th.
Community Development Committee. That's worth checking out. I mean, it's not radically different from the draft that they presented, several months ago. But, something that's good to think about, how we can be a part of that. Because I mean, that's a tricky issue. Everybody would sort of, I think, say that they would, be in favor of making sure people have access to housing. But whether, an apartment building gets built close to them is an entirely different story. And then whether we can, create more, transit-oriented development and like mixed-use spaces so that people don't have to, constantly travel and can live near where they work and these sorts of things. Just always good to keep, I think, forefront of our minds. If we're going to tackle big issues in this city, I mean, that has got to be one of them. And, obviously it's going to disproportionately affect people who are lower on the income scale, which will, tie in directly with our charge. So probably a good thing to make sure that you've checked out on YouTube. And, we need to think about how we kind of grapple with that going forward. And then I think just, something that could be a game changer for the city, the Ashley River Bridge or the Ashley River Crossing, broke ground yesterday for maybe the second time. But it's real this time. It's happening. And it's going to, along with things like the low line, that will be, kind of really starting in earnest next year, will really, start to kind of radically change the face of the city. Add to that Union Pier, which, we've talked about plenty of times. There's a lot of, really exciting game-changing opportunities for the city, that are happening and, that really, kind of coming to a head in the next year. So exciting time for us to figure out our part, and all that.
So the Bloomberg study, as well as those of you who remember when the Rapid Transit Project presented, talked about transit-related development and some changes in zoning and density, those kinds of decisions that need to be made. And Bonnie reminded me today after her conversation with her appointing authority that members of council looking for us to make specific recommendations. All right. So the idea of looking at some of the things that are in the Bloomberg report, crossing over with things that may be in the low line, all right, and say this is repeated several times, all right, and at least being able to say to council as part of the conversation that they should address those kind of things. And that, I think that probably would be a way to go. We're not going to be able to answer the big questions, right? Because it's who's got the money, who owns the land, all right, who's going to provide the subsidy. But there are questions that might be debated about density, height, and those sort of things that we perhaps could weigh in on.
Yeah. I should have added too that, I mean, everybody saw the outcome of the transportation sales tax referendum. And that will be, coming back in 26. It will be a real nail biter for the future of this area. I mean, it's got to pass. But I think we should, be, kind of proactive of what we want to see out of that. And I know that my view is it's not building a giant interstate or, more lanes all over the place. It's a transit system that we can develop around.
Mm.
Is this still your all's report? So are we going to have a discussion about your topics, or you're making your co-chairman's report right now?
I wanted Stephen to lead. We had a conversation about the housing issue and the points that Bonnie raised and the point that he raised early in the earlier conversation. I thought was important because as we move toward making recommendations about what we do between now and May, by the way, all of our terms end May 10th. And So what we do between now and May 10th in terms of making recommendations probably will have something to do with setting the table for the future of the commission. And that becomes important.
So
So-
are you entertaining comments
Yes,
now, Mr.
yes,
Chairman? Okay,
please.
that's what I was trying to ask.
Okay.
Yeah, so thank you very much for bringing forward the obvious, job that the city has to do to be a regional player in creating more inventory for housing. I mean, everything we're talking about in terms of the project, the program, the locations, it all still comes back to our core mission of, as Councilmember Gregory always talked about, doing it within the equity lens. And so I think we should have a group that basically looks at, a lot of these things have changed or evolved or, gotten more definitive as time goes on with the low line and the bus rapid transit and all of that. So, but our mission hasn't changed along those lines. So we need to be proactive, but also, you know, I would say jealous of the opportunities and the missed opportunities that could potentially occur in the excitement of creating more density, more housing. And if we are allowing the pure profit-taking developers to do all of this, our mission is going to get left, way down the track of priorities, if even any serious consideration once decisions are being made. I mean, I think I read, I don't know if this is true, but what I read about the proposal for the Sumar, the Ashley Landing, bigger development, the last thing I read about it is that they don't anticipate officially subsidizing or setting aside any affordable units within how many ever apartments, I don't even know, 300 plus apartments or something that's supposed to come forward in that bigger development, mixed use. So maybe that can be, justified and reasoned forward in terms of why they wouldn't even be looking at that at this concept stage of the game plan. I think a lot of it was because the concept stage had way left the station long before the public found out a lot about this. Edens is very good at what they do, and they have sort of, it's not a cookie cutter, but they have, I'm sure, their own data analytics and their own formulas for how to do a successful thing based on the location and the acreage that's available to them. To start from, a canvas and build up. So I just think that, we need to have sort of our eyes on the prize every single time, and to be mixing our messages with saying, yeah, we like a mid-rise building here, but we don't like the high-rise for whatever, it becomes sort of like subjective reasons. So I don't know if I'm all wet on that, but that's what comes to me as we're talking about these things that are going to happen, Union Pier, maybe not in my lifetime. So anyway, I do think that we should be serious about holding people's, feet to the fire, conscience, whatever it takes to keep the equity lens
Yeah, I
in front of us.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, and the notion, that we've talked about on a couple of occasions. There are people who are expert in the area, okay, but are not on the commission. We are, the 9 of us that are still here, catch it just trying to stay on top of the things that we're trying, to do, and what we might individually have passion about or expertise in, or because of your career. So are you suggesting that this area of housing, affordable housing, and I don't know whether or not we would include the unhoused initiatives, to create a working body over the next 4 months, okay, that might continue to survive and work regardless of what happens around the reauthorization, or it could be part of the specific reauthorization of HART. Because I think you really need to, if I'm hearing the message from Councilman McBride and Councilman Appel, all right, they want specific kinds of things, and the way us meeting once a month, all right, and kind of being general, and Adrian trying to keep us, aware of what else is moving on really doesn't allow us to kind of dig deep.
Well, I mean, we did have a housing subcommittee that, I don't know if all the members that were on it are still members of our commission, but, we should go back and revisit that in terms of,
Yeah.
I would still be very interested in
Okay.
being part of a,
Is it fair to say then that we get the human relations piece off the table? We'll get the housing committee up and running, all right? Because part of my thinking, I'm saying
refreshed.
we've
Let's
got
call it
till May,
refreshed.
we've got till May, all right, to kind of set a narrative or suggestion. So those are two areas that seem plausible, all right? And since there's a lot moving in both of those areas.
Yeah, and I rambled a bit, but I guess what in my mind is going to be important for us this year is, we've had, some awesome presentations. We've, familiarized ourselves with the issues. I think we just, need to pick off bite-sized pieces and get after it. I mean, so for housing, right? I mean, do we want to talk about, the fee and lieu system, for example, like whether that's calibrated correctly, whether, that's actually, incentivizing developers to, create affordable housing, or, pay us. Are they paying us enough to create our own affordable housing? Would we, is it more desirable for the city to go it on its own, or, try to encourage developers to build on site? Those are, big questions, but I mean, but you can boil it down to very simply like, okay, I mean, are we making developers give a second thought about whether they just go ahead and pay that fee in lieu and do what they want to do?
Not so far.
Yeah, my not so subtle, putting my finger on the scales, we're not doing that. Which, may be fine, right? Maybe again, maybe it's preferable that the city goes it on its own with its own fund, created by these funds. But, I just think that, where, I think we could pretty easily recommend like, where that should be. And it's a complicated issue, but, where that should be based on, work that other, advocates in the community have done. I'm sure we could get some folks to come in and tell us the realities of building a building and how expensive it is these days, and why, we shouldn't do that, or, whatever, just get into it. But, with every issue, I mean, I can tell you, I've met with I'm totally blanking on his name, but the guy that Ben Navarro hired to lead the Union Pier project going forward. He's a super talented guy, has done great work around the city. Look at what they came up with for the Courier Square project.
Is it Sotilli?
Hmm?
Is it Christopher?
No, it's Miller.
Oh,
But anyway, I had an opportunity to meet with him, and he's, really excited to tell the story of the mosquito fleet at Union Pier, right? So something that we've recommended, but I mean, just, all to say something to follow up on
and match it with
work with them
an
on-
economic development.
Right,
purpose.
absolutely.
Right.
I mean, it's murals or whatever would be cool, but, Black-owned businesses would be cooler.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
Plaques
it's-
and
I think it's
stories
safe to
don't
say.
get it. We
Yeah.
need to have the future forward of why the mosquito fleet funded, a very prosperous middle-class, working class for the African-American community that was coming out of slavery, and we need to do the same thing again.
Right. So, just taking the big things that, we're talking about and the council members are focused on, and, picking off the piece where we can really, speak to with a clear voice and hopefully be listened to.
Okay, well,
Or-
refresh the housing committee. I think that would be a subcommittee. I think that would be a,
So as I recall, Carol Fry, and Carol Jackson were the members of that committee.
weren't you? Or maybe it was before
Yes,
Tom's
I-
time, but
Yes.
we adopted him.
All right, and Tom, obviously because of his passion.
Another thing that, in addition to affordable housing, I think we have to keep a close watch on the homelessness situation because, from predictions, it's only going to get worse. So somehow, some way, I don't know how we get involved in that.
So we've attempted to try to continue to monitor one, what the mayor's proposal
Right.
was and how that's moving. As well as simultaneously as we found out what the, affordable housing advocates are asking for and what they're saying they need to be able to speak to that. For example, in the last budget cycle, right? The question of whether additional resources are being made to extend the number of days that they're doing feeding,
Mhm.
right? How soon, maybe it's a good time for you to provide the update in terms of what's happening with the Hope Center and the lease, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah. So the Hope Center lease was extended, which is good news. So it's not, it's a little bit more time for everybody to figure it out. I mean, I don't know if you guys have been to the Hope Center.
Yeah. It's in the middle of huge construction zone.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to get to.
And it's just, does not speak of an extraordinarily strong commitment
No.
to supporting
It's-
homeless folks in our community. But it's something, right? It's an effort where, there kind of wasn't one before that. And so, we need to build on that. But as far as, kind of a broader plan, it's up in the air. And I'm on the city council and the board for the Homeless to Hope Fund, and I could tell you that I really don't know what direction this is going to head in, whether they're getting real buy-in from the other counties, municipalities. I mean, I can tell you the city can't afford it alone. So, if we're not getting, if Dorchester County says no, that's one thing, right? But if, Dorchester and Berkeley are saying no, and Mount Pleasant, then, we've got a problem. So, more to come, I guess. That's a tough one. But I know the mayor's office is hard at work and, kind of with an eye on, sort of a deadline. I mean, you can't work on something forever if it's not going to be. So, I don't know if that leaves us with a great spot where we can, step into that. I don't, if anybody else has suggestions. One thing may be, if we thought about, what the scale of this ought to be. Just in talking to people, again, this is an issue where everybody says, yeah, you gotta help the homeless. But the nuts and bolts of it are tough, right? I mean, I know, like Tom's had some concerns about it being, males. And people would want to see results, and it's not like anybody's got like a magic wand to to fix all the issues that homeless folks deal with. So it's a tough thing. I mean, even if it got off the ground, right, is how do we sustain it? How do we make people see that there's good outcomes, even if people are expecting this guy's going to go into this shelter today, and in 90 days he's going to be back on his feet and stable and have his own apartment and all this kind of stuff. It's tougher than that. So yeah, said a lot of things without saying a whole lot there.
Yeah, so another dimension around the housing has to do with the Housing Authority's implementation of RAD. In which there are two projects moving, Carol?
Well, there's several projects that are moving. There are two that are working on the two of the biggest communities that right now are going to be totally redeveloped. So those, one is under contract with the developer Integral LLC out of Atlanta, and they're working through their entitlement, process in terms of they're gonna have to get rezoning, they're gonna have to get site plans and all of the site permits and all of that stuff. So that's Alvin's territory to know all the details about that, but they haven't, they signed the contract with the housing authority, so they are the master developer for the two properties that combined will turn into a new development called Morrison Station. It's Cooper River Courts and Meeting Street Extended, some of the oldest properties that the housing authority owns and operates. If you're at the post office on East Bay and you look through the post office parking lot, they're the little 1- and 2-story properties that sit right behind East Bay. And then all the way down to Meeting Street and that whole section. So that one is the furthest along. There's a proposal that I do think that we could entertain the housing authority to come and lay out the parameters for, affordability. It's going to be mixed income. So the guarantee for any of these deals that the housing authority enters into with private developers as partners start with the premise that the existing units, even if it's a total demolition, the existing units that are there prior to demolition will be returned to the same people if they choose to come return or stay on, and at the same a contract level of public housing prices for very low income residents. So that's the premise. And then anything on top of that is a negotiated deal with the housing authority as the new owner of the land. I mean, that's what this whole RAD program that came forward from HUD when they were running out of money to subsidize operating budgets for housing authorities, and the only thing they could contribute was ownership to the housing, each individual authority to literally own their land. Up until then, HUD owned the land and the housing authority had a contract to operate it. So, a lot of it over the last 10 years has been making changes as they go along based on what they learn. I think the Charleston Housing Authority is at a good point in HUD's learning curve because now they've had this program for at least 10, if not 12 years. And they know pretty much what they want, and they know how to bring it forward, and they know what to let go of. And so, we're feeling pretty good as the housing authority that these projects will happen again. I won't see the end of them. They're all phased development. The good news is the housing authority owns a ton of property under each one of these public housing communities because they're all spread out buildings. They're standalone buildings of, 20 units in each building and then spread out over many acres. So that's the good news. We have a lot of land to play with. So I'm happy to, be a liaison and ask the housing authority. I think maybe March would be, and maybe by March, the second property that is going to be contracted for a master developer is Gadsden Green, which will be an even more expanded set of parameters that it's going to begin with the contract, but then the nature of the contract is for the winning developer to create what they call a choice neighborhood proposition. And that means that there'll be a lot of more soft services. I went through the opening outline that I'm not really free to share right now in public, but it has a whole thing that's dedicated to what they call Section 8 under the HUD housing rules that basically develops the competency, the job opportunities, training for the residents. It's all dedicated to bring prosperity to the people on the property that's being redeveloped as well as the surrounding neighborhood. So that's going to be very exciting too. And we should have a lot of, I asterisked all the things that have the word equity next to it in my head, and there's a lot, so.
Well, I think, particularly the gas and green piece reminds me of the Haygood Avenue project, the heat study.
What to do with the water,
Yeah,
all
I
of
mean,
it.
all that comes together, so that's a housing and an environmental, justice issue,
Yes, it is.
all right? And we perhaps could focus, that's a way of focusing, on both of
Right.
those conversations, and there's no question about, the history there and the challenge.
Right. Yeah,
So one other thing that seems to me interesting, I noticed in the mayor's newsletter that he announced that in April, the Minority Business Expo is going to happen. I was on another call, and there are a couple of conferences coming in, national conferences coming in, and the nonprofit organizations that are the anchor host committee people are saying, well, we want local businesses, all right, to be engaged and involved in that. So I think it's important, that is fine, we've got support for the center, for the expo, all right, but how is that really translating into opportunities for folks with businesses? And as Integral or any of these other groups begin to develop, or, the Union Pier, all right, what investment is there, ought there be in the Business Resource Center, all right, to help folks build, to be able to grow as these projects happen. And I'm looking at my colleague Alvin, all right, and saying, how you make sure that happens, Alvin? I mean, to your point, Carol, about the equity lens, all right, part of the equity lens is not just giving people what they need, all right, but having people be part of the growth, the opportunity agenda, all right?
Yeah.
Right, so that is a slightly different kind of focus. We can talk about density and stuff like that, but it's also a question of, are the developers, when is there a pool for bonding, for example, if it's a construction related matter? The things that are barriers to, successful contractors taking it to the next level, needs to be included in these. And I'm not sure who's addressing that, if anybody.
I mean, you'd think it would be starting with the minority and women in business enterprise, but
Well, as an old government guy,
yeah,
the people who are doing widgets, all right, don't necessarily talk to the folks that are doing shoes, all right? And unless you force that kind of
no,
relationship.
I think it's an excellent question. I would
Unless you
think
force,
that-
unless you force the relationship and the discussion, what's happening early about that, so we don't later on come with folks picketing and boycotting and complaining about, we didn't have the opportunity.
Man,
Let's talk long enough, you see.
it's been so long since I've been here. I forgot how to work the equipment. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just kind of been frustrating because I've been on the other side of that equation. I mean, typically you don't hear about an opportunity until it hits the street, which by that time it's too late, right?
Yeah.
They have a pretty good idea of who they want to select, whatever, contractor and subs and things of that nature. But I think it's a function of the city or whomever it is that has the opportunity to be proactive. So how do we force us being the city to be proactive in doing the engagement prior to the project hitting the street? So when I was on the CRDA board years ago, one of the things that they had was a roundtable discussion. So as a member, you would come sit with the CRDA folks and they would learn about your business, right? And then they would then go out whenever they would, try to sell Charleston or respond to a RFP or whatnot. They had the information on your particular business that they could sell to basically promote Charleston and try to get businesses to come. And then they will partner you up. Well, not necessarily partner you up, but recommend you to these said businesses so that those relationships are already being created prior to the opportunity coming. So perhaps maybe that's something that the city of Charleston can engage in, right? Maybe Ruth can, we can figure out how do we go out and find the businesses prior to the opportunities happening so we can create those partnerships whenever the opportunity comes. So to me, it's just a function of there has to be just crazy amount of proactivity as opposed to being reactive at the end of the day.
I think that Ruth and her office would say that that's what this expo thing is all about in April. And maybe if it needs to be, more iterative or more proactive, as you're saying, Alvin, to not just be a one-day event, but to have some, legs that
Yeah.
go along with it, then that would be the place to
Yeah.
start with her.
It's almost like you need to have like a couple of days like speed dating sessions.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's here's your company, you're on the, MWBE category, right? We learn what they do and then we figure out what, who are some of the larger contractors out there or developers, whatnot. And then, we set up these speed dating sessions so that, folks can already have partners going into a day one, as opposed to signing a good faith, affidavit and saying that they tried when in actuality,
Yeah.
I've gotten phone calls before. I was on the list and I was like, that's nothing remotely to what I do, but it allows you to be able to sign the form and
Yeah.
check the box.
So I think for me, seeing the announcement that the April date is in place.
Yeah.
All right, perhaps a conversation with Ruth, and, other folks who were involved in talking about these larger scale projects to make certain that, we know there are a couple of hundred agencies, right, that'll show up. I don't know that these developers, all right, will be showing, all right? Or perhaps it's a suggested roundtable about opportunity in the context of development, redevelopment, talking to the folks who are working with the housing authority, to set up a session and those kinds of things.
So just something along those lines, I was at the legislative reception for the Metro Chamber of Commerce last night, which is an awesome event, right? I mean, all these people who are doing all these things are there wanting to talk about it. And, the chamber, I think, tries certainly with equity programs, and it's fantastic that they do. And even in the face of, sort of a backlash towards those types of initiatives, has remained committed to it and been pretty vocal about that. I can tell you, having run for office, that they have no problem getting a bunch of bigwigs in a room together if they want to, find out what a candidate's about, and make a decision about whether they want to endorse that person. I wonder if we could, work to strengthen the ties between, between the small business incubator and, the bigger folks at the Metro Chamber, the Realtors Association. I think they would probably welcome those opportunities, or at least make sure that those people have opportunities to participate in the trainings that they do, or in like the leadership academies and stuff. All fantastic programs that would be great for anybody who's trying to network and try to find out about those opportunities before they're already spoken for.
Yeah, I think, there are great opportunities to do that. And thinking about the Haygood redevelopment, environmental plan, and the Gas and Green redevelopment. So if there can be two things being talked about at the same time, you get a little bit better development. My point in wanting to have this conversation is, like, between now and May, we have to put on the table conversations and start conversations that are sustainable, all right? And that there are enough people who are stakeholders, be they city council members or community folks or the developers, right, who say that this is something that we want to do. And it's actually a pregnant moment, as you suggest. The whole notion of equity and inclusion is something that you can't talk about that. You're right. All right. Well, the reality is that in order for the success of continued growth of Charleston, all right, we're going to need everybody doing as much as they can and being as prosperous as they can. And so
Yeah, we don't need to talk about it.
you're taking the blinders off. We can't, the bigger question about prosperity and growth and restitution and restoration and growth is what we're really, need to be communicating to folks, not the divisive kinds of things.
But it's action more than, I mean, we don't need to talk about it. I think that we've put a framework together that, and at listening to you all talk about, the small business economy and things like that. I mean, that's probably the one final topic of, of our disparities that we've never really shined a light on in terms of having a group come here and make presentations that then, can be part of the HARC video series. And but there's Low Country Local First, and there is another one. I just lost my train of thought, but there's 2 or 3 groups. Oh, the YWCA has a whole job training support program. So there's 2 or, several little groups that operate independent. They've given up sort of getting any big support from the municipalities. I think Low Country Local First is making inroads in North Charleston, thanks to the new mayor and some of their, needs as far as a city redevelopment. But we've never really had that topic, have we, on our agenda as far as
Only
shining a light on local business development?
Yeah.
I think that would be good for us. Thank you,
Okay.
Stephen.
All right. Healthy conversation. Again, Human Relations Commission, housing, work, this economic, business development, all, I think, important things for us to have actions and messaging around, and be engaging as you talk to the members of the city council, ask them their thoughts about things in these areas. What are they thinking about? What are they hearing? So that then when we come back, we can perhaps take that information, moving it through the subcommittees and moving it to real action. You got anything in history and culture, sir?
No, it's been a holiday month. I've been able to catch up with most folks. Down a little bit, so I had to take some quiet time.
Yeah. So I sent to you guys the Nick Butler's piece on Emancipation Day Parade. And I did that because the way he couched it in 2017 when he wrote it, all right, was this is a piece of Charleston history, right, that everybody should be engaged in. And as we move from the Emancipation Day Parade to the Martin Luther King week of activity, right, into Black History Month, then into Women's History Month, right, it seems to me that there needs to be more intentionality about saying here are these things are what brings us together. So I was thinking about, one of the recommendations to give to your subcommittee is that their, park or the city have a standard calendar of these events, all right, are always acknowledged as the day of. So I'm a member of the Association for Study of African American Life and History. The organization that's responsible for identifying what the theme is for the year. The theme for 2025 is African Americans and labor. Right? So whether we're talking about the port workers, right, or we're talking about the mosquito fleet, all right, these are all things. So and the organization's 110 years old this year, all right. So standing up and saying on January 28th or February 16th, whatever day works on the city council agenda, all right, that this is important and these events are happening, all right? Black people are not the only ones who should be showing up to the parade, just like Jewish people are not the only ones that should be showing up to the Holocaust activities, all right? And part of our notion of building community, all right, is somebody's got to be intentional about that, right? And that has come and gone, if you will, as part of the byproduct of this whole notion has become more and more polarized. Everybody goes into their corners, and I go to my stuff, but I don't come to your stuff, and I don't learn anything about your stuff because I'm not there, right? So that for me is an important piece. Sure. So next, I just as a commercial for Black History, the Time Machine is excellent. It's got all kinds of interesting historical pieces about Charleston, and very often it's multiracial, multi-ethnic, all kinds of interesting things that we just don't think about. The International African American Museum in July is hosting the National Association of African American Museums, bringing folks from all over the country. The degree to which that institution is being used effectively. I also saw that the school superintendent in op-ed said that she's looking for partners. Okay, partners for what? Which partners, right? The school board owns land that some of the city council members think could be provided for housing opportunity, right? Right. So I mean, so those kinds of conversations cross-sector, and part of the challenge that we have is that folks say, well, like you're about municipal government. Well, we have the boundary span, all right. We have to partner. The government has to partner, and people in government sometimes don't see those opportunities in the way that those of us around the table can. So I think that's an important thing. Guess what?
Two things. One, I thought that we had a city calendar that would have these things in, but that's, I mean, obviously they should be on the calendar. But to the labor focus that you talk about, there's I think, hugely significant local historical item, and that is the construction of the Grace Bridge and the Black labor force that built the footings of that bridge that tied Charleston to Mount Pleasant and everything north, got huge write-ups 100 years ago and was well acknowledged and hugely significant. And it's just another thing that you might want to have in your hip pocket.
Well, again, the History Commission and the Cultural Office, all right, are places where this is part of could be part of their work, right? And perhaps not being fire or police, right, or stormwater, right, results in them not getting the kind of attention. And from time to time, maybe we should, speak to that, how important it is. Okay. Comments for the good of the order? New business? So I'm hoping that the subcommittees will get busy. We're looking for a resolution, a recommendation to come at our next meeting around the Human Relations Commission piece. We'll think, Carol, we're looking for what specific kind of presentations we need to schedule around housing.
Okay,
And Alan, let's try and reach, out to see how we think through how we can be helpful with making the minority business helping grow
Yeah,
the minority
yeah,
business
make
expo.
make the
And
most,
to
yeah.
make it more effective.
And
and-
ongoing. I mean, it
Yeah.
shouldn't just be a one,
Right.
you know,
Right,
one-time
right, right,
thing.
right. And the other thing is, another thing is there's nothing wrong with us showing up. I mean, when we show up to the Hope Center, right, it makes a difference,
Mhm.
right? We show up to the Business Resource Center, right? Just walk through and check out what's going on.
Yeah.
It can make a difference.
The city contributed money to Neighbors Together. I think that was in the 2025 budget to help them with their clearinghouse, whatever they're calling it. So basically, they're matching landlords who are willing to take a subsidy of some kind
Mhm.
with people who need housing, that they will not be scrutinizing, you know, credit history and background checks and things like that. Neighbors Together will take the responsibility for vetting the clients. And then the landlord's agreement is that they'll take Neighbors Together's word that this is a person worthy of being a tenant. And so they'll eliminate a lot of the barriers that a person like that would have to go, you know, would not get past if they were trying to find housing on their own. So I think that's a good use of the city's. I've
Yeah.
forgotten how much it was,
Yeah.
100,000 or whatever, I
That's
don't know.
good, good. I forgot to mention, and I'll make a note, the December 10th meeting of the Community Police Advisory Committee. There was a pretty, intense conversation, around, what that body is supposed to do
Hmm.
and how it's supposed to do it.
Good.
And, I think
So you just talked among yourselves? I mean,
I
they,
am-
they
I-
talked
no,
among
they, no, I
themselves?
mean, it was an interaction between them, the citizens and the police department, all right, the legal department, all right, and there's some disagreements, all right, that might wind up in terms of proposed language changes to, the ordinance that created CPAC,
Hmm.
right? So
Hmm.
that's something to watch. And, Jillian, the staff person who had been facilitating the procedural justice work, has been shifted more to work on putting together a strategic plan and grants and things of that nature. So there's a shift in the department. So the heavy lifting around police community relations has always been CPAC's responsibility. The question of whether or not what that looks like in the future is something for us to watch as well.
Okay, well,
Okay.
can I mention the ERA is still lingering? Biden is basically the sole authority. He's the last stop for adding the 28th Amendment. It's been fully ratified, as I talked about last month. Nobody understands why he's not directing the archivist to publish the amendment. It's a ministerial function, basically.
Mhm.
Has to go be published in the Federal Register,
Right.
and then
Come
it
on.
becomes part of the Constitution. Senators have been writing letters, you know, basically as groups, segments of the Senate, nonstop. Women under the League of Women Voters and the American Association of University Women's Leadership have been calling and emailing and texting nonstop for the last many months. It's very frustrating. So President Biden has basically 7 days, tomorrow and all of next week, to make this happen. And we don't understand why he's not doing that. So I gave out the information. I'll be happy to circulate it again, but it doesn't have to be women, you know. you can make a call to the White House switchboard and they're all very nice and they say, we understand, we've passed so basically it's a tally of how many people are lobbying President Biden to do that last ministerial step. The archivist is an obstructionist by everyone's recount. Has a statement on record that she doesn't think the ratification is legitimate, but that is not her place. If it's going to be, litigated later on,
So be it.
so be it.
Mhm.
But it needs to be part of the Constitution by the time Biden leaves office on January 20th.
Okay.
Women need it more than ever, for
Thank you,
obvious
Carol, for
reasons.
that.
To Carol's earlier point, just want to draw everybody's attention to the YWCA series of events. It should be fantastic. Our organization, the Jewish Federation, marches in the parade every year, and we'd be thrilled for you to join us if you don't have a group to walk with. We would love for you to walk with us, and there are a number of other events going on throughout the week, including events for teens and
Yeah,
all ages. It's really fantastic.
there's
what
like a
YWCA is
speakers
doing.
bureau thing that is at the Avery. I've forgotten the night. Might be that Friday night. I don't know. That's my favorite thing.
So Adrian, have you circulated that calendar of events? Yeah,
No, I didn't circulate the YWC.
well, please do that.
Yeah, that'd be nice. They're great. I mean, breakfast is fine. It's too early.
And it's too big.
Student thing at the Avery is fabulous, and ecumenical service on Sunday at 4:00 is fabulous.
And I just wanted to add for the record again that the Charleston Interreligious Council will be here on the 28th at the city council meeting for the Interfaith Harmony Month proclamation, and it's part of a month of events. We met last week, and there'll be some really fascinating discussions around food and healing and all the kinds of topics that we've tackled here and different faith traditions approaches to all of these things. And yeah, we're already coming out on January 28th for the Hark Report. So we'll see you there.
I forgot to mention I keep forgetting whether that's Kellogg or Mellon, supports the National Day of Healing, which is January 21st. And what they suggest folks do, small groups of people, do small events, because so much is on the Charleston agenda. I don't think anybody's picking up on that here, but again, that's an example of national models that can be used. And the whole question, it'd be interesting to me for us to think about when you're looking at the Human Affairs Council concept. A number of them are countywide, right? A number of them are countywide. And to the extent that the tri-county interaction and problems or solutions, right, are not just city-based, right? That's important. I know in conversations with Jerome Smalls, right? He's working on to try to create a county youth reduction kind of thing. I mean, so the whole idea of you don't have to stay in the boundary, okay? And if there is value to those concepts, right? Because the discussion and debate in Charleston will be whether to continue, revise, expand, disband, Human Affairs and Racial Conciliation Commission. We need to take advantage of the opportunity to make certain that those things are talked about in this context.
And there's a new leader over there, Charleston County. Reverend Kylon Middleton is the new chair of the council. So maybe some things that were considered in terms of collaboration with the county before that didn't make it. it's a new day over there, so.
Okay,
Okay.
and Adrian, you need anything else? Bob, I'm sorry.
Just thinking of national days, I think it's appropriate to mention that today is a national day of remembrance for past President Jimmy Carter. And whatever you think of his administration, it's hard to think of a gentleman who has done more post-position than him. And everybody's aware of his efforts for the homeless, but there's another effort that I don't think got nearly as much recognition, but there was a parasitic worm that I can't pronounce that was endemic in Africa that was incredibly debilitating. And thanks to the efforts of President Jimmy Carter, there are now 14 cases. That's all that are left. And I just think it's worthy of remembering.
Plus, voting rights around the world, fair elections, right?
Right.
And peace.
And peace.
He helped negotiate the treaty between Israel and Egypt, and it was part of his work throughout his entire life post presidency.
Yeah, wonderful role model. Thank you for that. Motion to adjourn? Moved by somebody, seconded by everybody. We're done.